All right, so we're back, and this is quite a different story as what we were told or what we saw in either like the cartoon version or even the live action remake with Glenn Close. This is more similar to how Malevolent was created to be the origin story of the villain, but it was made specifically to kind of give this different light and to give a different perspective, because maybe things aren't quite as we're told. What if the villain's not actually that much of a villain? It's just obviously we're looking at it from one character who has this different perspective on the situation, and because of the chain of events, that's what has led to the villain actually being villainous. But what if they're not as evil as we think they are? And so it's kind of like what I believe they were aiming for. And I can very much see this as being not so much as a prequel, but more of in an alternate Disney universe. What if Cruella wasn't actually that evil? Because again, we do have this kind of origin, but it's not that much of a... If you ever see the movie, you'll get what I mean. But here we go. My first impressions of the movie was that it was entertaining. It's a very long movie. It's over 2 hours long. It's about like 2 hours and 20, something like that. It's still fun. If you've seen the Devil Wears Prada, it's kind of like the same kind of theme, that there's a lot of fashion. It's located within the fashion world, but it's not necessarily, just about fashion. Well, it kind of is. I'll explain. But first, it is a good movie to be watching with the family. It might be a little bit too long for the kids, and there's not that much Dalmatians. So if you're waiting to look at Dalmatians, it's not about that. It's not about the dogs at all. So, keep your perspectives low and don't get your expectations that high, because this is a different film from the Disney film, the original Disney film, the cartoon version of 101 Dalmatians. This is in a different league. Well, not a different league, but it's a whole different story. Literally, it is a different story. And so, I haven't really watched any reviews except for one. And in that review, the person had commented on Cruella's kind of like, maybe they were going for dissociative identity disorder. For those who are not familiar, it is a psychological diagnosis where a person, because our psyche, we can see ourselves as having different facets, like different sides to the same person, but we're still the same person, because you could be like your angry self, your happy self, your sad self, that sort of kind of concept. Those are your different facets, but you're still you. However, there are some people who don't manage to have the psyche as cohesive, and so that leads to having different personalities. So you might have, maybe we're talking about a little girl, and they might have a personality of a 28-year-old man, or they might have the personality of a 56-year-old woman, that sort of thing. So it is thought in theory, and it might not be very accurate, but it is thought that there is this lack of cohesiveness somehow, and that causes for the person to have different personalities within them that are separate from one another. So it's like having different people within the same body. Now, that being said, this is not about... I do not agree that this is what they were aiming for. I think Disney was going for something much more simpler. Now, I'm going to go into slightly spoiler territory. So if you're not interested in getting spoiled, again, it's a good movie to watch with your family and with your friends. You will enjoy it. Just don't get your expectations that it's going to be about Dalmatians, because it's not. It's a different movie, and it has a different story than just, oh, Cruella de Vil is just evil and that's it. There's more nuance, and so if you're interested in seeing that, great. It is the movie for you. If it's not, well, now you know. Now, I'll try to not spoil it too much, but I can't promise anything from this point on. So, with Cruella, we start off with Cruella as the little girl, or even actually much younger as a baby. And so we see that as a baby, for some reason, like genetically, she is born having half her hair white and the other half black. Now, that being said, we do see that she's taken off somewhere, and she's in the hands of this loving woman. I mean, she is treating her as if she were her own daughter, and she takes care of her and everything. But we do see that in the montage of her childhood, she does cause a little bit of problems. And the way that the mother, or the foster mother, describes it is that she has a different personality. She has a Cruella side, that evil side of Estella. Now, it's not that she has a different personality. Again, I don't think that Disney was aiming for a dissociative identity disorder. However, I could see that very much, that maybe it's a part of her, nature. And I'll touch about that theme of nature versus nurture towards the end. But, I'll just suffice to say that she has a predisposition to acting a certain way, which might not be seen as being very, you know, either like ladylike or very much like a child should behave. So that's where issues start with Estella. Um, so when she's in school, she even gets in trouble. To be fair, the kids are picking on her, and she does defend herself. So I do not really blame her as much as I do blame like the other teachers and the other kids, because they're the ones who are causing her to retaliate against them. I mean, that's just me. And so now we go ahead and um, there is a breaking point in which Estella gets well, she's about to be suspended, or not suspended, expelled from school. Now, the mother, in an effort to kind of not have that on her record, she says, "No, no, I'm going to take her out of school." No, but she's expelled. No, no, no. It cannot go on record because I already said I'm going to take her out of the school. And she does. I mean, she does leave towards London, but first she needs to make a quick stop. The only thing we know is that she wants to stop by a friend's house for something, but then they're going to head straight to London, specifically towards this fountain. I do not remember the name of the fountain, but it is kind of like a key location for Estella, even throughout the movie, because that's kind of her way of communicating with her mother. Now, going back to the mother, when they reach the friend's house, she's told to stay in the car. Obviously, she doesn't, and she goes ahead and wanders around, and she gets into trouble. I mean, there are 3 Dalmatians that are after her because she's technically not supposed to be there. And as they're running after her and she's outside, we see that Estella is with another woman, but they're kind of in this. And I should explain where they arrive to for this supposed friend is a mansion, and where Estella's mom and this other lady, where they're located, is kind of close to a cliff, but still on the mansion property. And all of a sudden, Estella trips, and the dogs just jump right over her, and they kind of push her mother over the cliff, and she falls down and she dies. Now, Estella is very scared. She's very, well, obviously, traumatized because her mother just died. So she's running away to not get caught. And eventually she does end up in London, over at that fountain. That's where she meets Horace and I forget the other guy's name, but that's where she meets the two people, you could say, that are going to end up being her sidekicks, her minions, if you will. Now, in the movie, they're more like friends, but still, it does come down to the same where there's going to be a dynamic. And so years go by, and what they've noticed is that she's very good with costumes, and so they use her for creating costumes so that they can go ahead and either like steal or kind of infiltrate different places so that they can, uh, as a camouflage, so that they can effectuate their plan. That's that sort of thing. Now, when one thing too is that she's always been fascinated by the fashion industry, right? And she's always had this kind of eye of being different. And so she one day gets a job, but rather than selling clothes, she's put as in charge of janitorial duty. So she's just cleaning restrooms and offices. She gets mad at this point because the manager is like very mean and very condescending, until she gets drunk one night because she's late at night at work, and she kind of rearranges the front display. This catches the eye of this one lady, the Baroness, played by Emma Thompson. Not to be confused by Emma Stone. Emma Stone is Estella, or Cruella. You get the picture. And so she ends up inviting Estella to become one of her designers, and she's very fascinated by her because what she designs really catches her eye, and she really does have a different vision. Now, that being said, everything is not so um, black and white, with the pun intended, with her hair. So Estella, in order to blend in, she has painted her hair red because she's so different. She doesn't want to be recognized. That's her hair color for most of the film as Estella. Now, one thing that I will note is that not only is she great, but she also notices certain things from the Baroness, because the Baroness is very big in the fashion industry. And one of the things is that the Baroness steals her ideas, and she's non apologetic. She's very much a I don't care, and this is going to be my way because that's how I am successful. And you can tell that there is this kind of change, and it does come into play in a reveal later on in the movie. I'll get to that in just a bit. And so, as Estella spends more time with the Baroness, she begins to realize a couple of things. And the first off is that the Baroness knew her mother. The second thing is that the Baroness is hiding something. And not only that, but she has her mother's necklace. Now, her mother, Estella's mother, had shown her the necklace before and said it was a family heirloom. And so when she saw the Baroness having that necklace, obviously it's hers, so she wants to get it back. And so, as Horace, not Jasper, Horace would say, there's the angle. And the angle is, well, get the necklace back. And she does. And what happens is kind of fascinating because in order to accomplish her goal, Estella kind of reverts herself to Cruella. And that's when she restores her hair as black and white. And now she wears a wig, a red color wig, for her hair. Still to blend in, but still. So at daytime, she's Estella, and when there's like special events, she messes with the Baroness by being Cruella, her real self. It is very fascinating how this whole happens, because she kind of shows her by having different designs and taking over the spotlight, and the Baroness is not very happy because of it. And one of the things that kind of sparks Estella's memory as Cruella is the first time that she meets the Baroness again as Cruella, because she shows her a whistle and she begins to whistle. Now, before Estella's mom died, and when Estella had tripped and fallen, she had always thought that because she fell down, that the dogs jumped over her and they went straight for the mother. But something that is really well done is that In that same moment when the music is, everything else is quiet down, you only hear that music, that thumping and thumping. You also have that, I don't know if you can hear that, but it's a whistle. You hear like a slight whistle. It's very low. I mean, it's very low volume. You can still hear it. And when she hears that whistle again as Cruella, she notices, and it dawns on her, it was her, the Baroness, who had blown the whistle. And it wasn't her that actually caused her mother to die, but it was the Baroness who had blown the whistle, telling the dogs to push her mother over the cliff. And that's when she wants to exact her revenge. Not just about the necklace, but she wants to have revenge. So that's the angle. I know that the necklace was the angle before, but now this is the true angle. And that's where you have the legend, Cruella. Now, because Cruella is causing such a scene and she's really, really pushing the spotlight out of the Baroness, she has become her enemy. Now, the Baroness is intrigued by Cruella, but at the same time, she wants to kill her because she's the competition. And how do you deal with competition? You kill her. Suffice to say that with the failed attempt at getting back the necklace, one of the Dalmatians that the Baroness has actually eats it. And this is kind of like one of the things that I find kind of odd, because when Horace, Jasper, Estella, when they kidnap the dogs, they actually start eating, the pillows, the cushions. They start eat everything, but they never go to the restroom. That is a serious concern. Like, realistically, if an animal or even a human by that chance doesn't defecate, then that's some serious blockage, and that requires some, let's say, very extreme measures. But I'm not going to tell Disney how to be real. I mean, that's on them. Anyhow, what we come to realize at the very end is that, well, not at the very end, but what we come to realize is that the necklace, its value is not because of the gemstone that it has. It's because that's where a key is hidden. And so with that key, there is a chest that one of the confidants, he actually works as a bodyguard. Well, not a bodyguard. I'm not sure if it's like a bodyguard or more of a, like more like a servant type of thing. But, he is the one that has the chest. And he's the one that lets Estella know, hey, this is the important part. The key, open it. And then he shows her something that really reveals a great plot of the story. Again, if you don't want that much spoilers, feel free to skip ahead. I'll only take 30 seconds, more or less. But I'll give you time. One. Okay, so if you skipped, you skipped. If you didn't, too bad. Estella is actually the Baroness's daughter. The thing was that the Baroness, when she was pregnant, she wasn't very happy. The Baron was. She wasn't. Because having a child, she looked at it as was going to hinder her chances at being a successful businesswoman in the fashion industry. So she had told her confidant, that bodyguard slash servant, to get rid of Estella. Those were her exact words. Obviously, what she meant was she wanted him to kill Estella, but because he couldn't, harm the baby, obviously, who would want to harm a baby? What he does is that he gives that baby to one of the maids, and I'll quote him, the nicest woman to have ever lived. And that is who Estella knew as her mother. And so when we get back to it, Again, Estella now really much embodies Cruella and goes for her full revenge. And she does. She doesn't kill the Baroness, but she does get her in a very precarious situation where she gets imprisoned and she stays with the mansion and with what is rightfully hers as her inheritance, except not as Stella, but as Cruella. And that's kind of where it starts. Now, a few things to address is that this movie does something interesting with how in the original cartoon film, Cruella was known for wanting to skin dogs, or I should say, for skinning dogs and using their fur for clothing. And in this movie, the way they handle that is that while there is a scene where she does use like a kind of like a fur coat with on spots, kind of like a Dalmatian, it's not really, she didn't really use the Dalmatians. What she did was that, well, we don't really see it happening, but she just uses like fake fur and she uses other materials so that it appeared as fur, kind of just to mess around with the Baroness. And when one of her friends kind of confronts her on this, like, did you really use the dogs? She actually just answers, well, no, I mean, people need a villain, so I just gave them something to see me as a villain as. So she really just let that rumor kind of remain, but she didn't really use any animals or harm any animals. Perfect. The other thing to address is that apparently there was like a very small number of people that were causing an uproar because one of the characters is gay in this film. Here's the thing, they never say that that character is gay, like in the movie. Maybe in the interviews, but I haven't seen anything. Maybe they are a gay character. Here's the thing, that character, Artie, is has a lot of flair, and regardless of the character being gay or not gay, it doesn't really affect the film because his like main purpose is to be a friend, but also to create the costume that ultimately Estella is going to use to use in her plan to get the Baroness incarcerated, because the way that she has her imprisoned is by creating a public scene, making it seem like the Baroness killed Estella. And so with her costume, she's able to kind of not fall down the cliff, but rather glide down. And so when she comes back as Cruella, which surprisingly nobody thinks twice about. They think they're two different people. We'll leave the Superman effect for another time. But, he is the one that created that costume. That being said, does it really matter? Ultimately, for the story, it doesn't. Is it a good thing to have a character who is gay in a Disney movie? I mean, you could argue that it is. I mean, for me, it's not that much of an issue, so I don't really care. But maybe for other people, it is a good thing because they see themselves more represented, and that's good. I will say that saying that he's the first gay character is kind of not true, because if you looked at the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast with Emma Watson, technically that, the minion for Gaston, he's gay. In the end of the movie, you do see him kind of flirt and dance with another guy. So technically, Artie is not the first gay character, and I'm very sure that there's other characters before that have been. Again, it doesn't really affect the movie, and it really doesn't really change anything. But if it does mean more representation, I mean, that's good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, going to the topic of nature versus nurture. In psychology, when we talk about nature versus nurture, yes, you are predisposed to certain behaviors and to having certain schemes, or kind of like these certain patterns of thought and behavior, but ultimately, the way that your actions are going to be determined by how you are raised. So I'll use as a quick example the Iceman, who was a notorious serial killer. He was known for, being an abuser, in domestic violence. He was known for killing people. He's known for not really caring, like being nonchalant about the whole thing. And the thing is, when we look at it from a psychological perspective, we can see that, okay, when he was a kid, he was abused by his father. His father was an alcoholic and all this. So he wasn't raised in a good environment. However, psychologically speaking, as in his psyche, he might be already predisposed to, I don't want to say bravery, but not feeling fear as much as the average person, which means that he's not afraid of being getting caught, or he's not afraid of getting into fights. And it's kind of like the same feeling that same type of pattern of thought and that kind of emotions. That's kind of like the same thing that you could probably see in, for example, a police officer who was willing to put their lives on the line to protect other people, or as a soldier, or in these types of situations where you're protecting someone else. Except that, with his history as childhood traumas and everything else, he was led to a different path. Maybe if his childhood and his upbringing would have been different, he would have been a soldier, a firefighter. He could have probably redirected that sort of bravery. And I'm using air quotes because bravery, as in he's not feeling that fear, not necessarily that, oh, he's Superman, but he that could have been redirected towards something beneficial for society. Same thing here. I don't think they were going Disney was going for dissociative identity disorder, but I do make the case that Estella has a predisposition for being analytical and being strategic and being ambitious. So obviously, when she becomes, her Cruella persona, it's not that she's becoming somebody else. It's just that now she's kind of redirecting herself into a different path instead of being like the meek hard worker. She is more directed towards, okay, I know what I want. I'm going to get there by non-conventional means, and this is how I'm going to do it. Does this mean she's ruthless? Does this mean that she's violent? Does this mean no? Because again, she didn't kill the Baroness. She didn't really harm her physically, but she used her mind, her beautiful mind, to entrap the Baroness into her own demise, because that's what she does. Now, another thing I want to point out is that I think something that Disney did very well is how they use the dogs, the Dalmatians that the Baroness has. So, as I mentioned before, the Baroness has 3 Dalmatians, and at some point, Estella kidnaps the dogs, and they remain with her for almost towards the end of the film, when the Baroness actually gets them back. And here's the thing: the dogs really function more like a thermometer, because as the movie progresses and as the dogs become more, they become more warm towards her, you do see Estella change from being Estella into being Cruella and being more like the Baroness. In that being cold and doing, willing to do almost anything to accomplish her goals. And so, as we see her progress down this path, the dogs are becoming more warmer and warmer towards her. Kind of like she's becoming more like the Baroness. And it's an excellent thermometer throughout the film. And that's a very excellent use of the dogs. I mean, they could have just not done anything with them, but the way they handled it was excellent. I love it. Now, let me go down to another point. Actually, let me go to this quick point because one thing to note is that I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but her dog, because they have two dogs, one who has an eye patch called Wink, but then Estella, when she was before meeting with the other two guys, she had found this dog out on the streets. Now, I don't remember his name, but he really does remind me of Benji for some reason. So there was a scene where Estella's kind of she was caught by the Baroness. She's left in a building that's burning down. She's left there to die. And the dog, who I'll call Benji, I mean, when he comes back and tries to free her, the only thing I could think was, don't die, Benji, don't die. Because, I mean, come on, it's a cute dog and everything. It is very clear that it's CGI. And maybe in some points it's not, but, you know, for the most part of the movie, it is very much CGI. You can notice by the way they move. I mean, it's not a natural feeling type of movement. Anyway, I'm getting way off track. And so there's that with what I wanted to say about the film. It really was a good film. I did think that they did things well. I'm not going to say it's like a masterpiece, but for what Disney was attempting, or what I think they were attempting, they did reimagine a story that really nobody needed, but it can be appreciated. I mean, it's not terrible, not at all. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what I have to say. What are your thoughts? I know that if looking at the titles of some of the reviews, you know, they really didn't like Cruella, but again, I didn't watch them, so I don't know how that is. Leave your thoughts if you do manage to find this video, and you know, feel free to browse at the other reviews and whatever I have to say. And well, peace out.